Okay, welcome back. So this is our ninth lecture in the Process to Synthesis series of lectures. And this one is titled Process Concept Product. And it's focused primarily on just looking at a number of contemporary artists, all artists that I particularly like, and just kind of discussing some of their work in terms of how it relates to those three concepts, to the concept of concept itself, process, and product. And I think so. With someone, let's start with Rachel White-Reed, who is one of my all-time favorite artists. I think she is truly amazing, and she's produced these amazing sculptures. One of the things that all of these sculptures have in common is kind of an interest in um, negative space. And in that way, I feel like you can see her body of work as kind of fitting into that sort of back to basics um, theme, which is that one of the fundamental ways that in the 18th and 19th century sculptors thought about sculpture, and especially as it moved into the 20th century in England and Britain, there was this interest in the idea that sculpture was about an interaction between positive and negative volume spaces. And so a lot of writers writing about sculptors like Bernini talking about his amazing use of negative space volumes to make the sculptures more engaging. And then you see that coming through in the work of like someone like Henry Moore, and that being so important in the history of British sculpture. And what Rachel White-Reed is doing is kind of taking that kind of fundamental idea and then spinning the whole idea of sculpture on its head using that idea, where she looks at spaces and she makes negative space sculptures of them. So that this is a negative space cast of all the negative space of a stairway. And they have this amazing kind of familiarity and yet weirdness to them because we can kind of see the positive thing that should be there, but we can kind of not. Um, so that kind of interest in the negative volume and turning the negative volume into the positive, and then that being a transformational thing. That's a major part of her concept, and it's also a major part of her process because she just in kind of like thinking through her work, casting things and finding the casts of negative spaces is an important way she um, processes and thinks through her ideas. And then in terms of product, I think that the work succeeds, especially the pieces that succeed the best, in part because the product is so ambitious and so challenging, and the craft um, is so successful. Another artist who is like that, in some ways, would be Gursky. Definitely in terms of how the ambition and the craft really sells the conceptual frameworks of the work. I would say that if you were to describe the fundamental idea that Gursky is aiming at in his photography, Gursky, by the way, is the contemporary photographer who has sold artwork at the highest price. So um, the highest selling work of contemporary photography belongs to Andreas Gursky. And the way I think of his work is that it's about um, creating photo images that are so overwhelming in information, so much clarity to every part that they push us beyond what we think seeing is like, right? Because the way the human eye works, we automatically have to focus on a thing and see that one thing, and then the minute we're focusing on that one thing, we're less attentive to the other things. And he's creating these ginormous photographic images that are so crisp and clear to all the parts that they kind of defy the normal way we think about how our eyes read a picture because everything is so competing equally for our attention. And and then the lengths that he goes to try to create these kind of situations, traveling all around the world, going to extraordinary places that most people have never been to. Um, There's one, I think it's this one that's like in India, and it's a um, part of this vast warehouse of recycling materials. And this is from a concert, I believe, in Brazil, might have been a Madonna concert. And so in all of these works, he's looking for situations that are just totally kind of overwhelming and so much information that your eye can barely read it, and it almost defies seeing it as a picture. It's almost like hard for your eyes to even believe it could exist as a picture. And he goes, like I said, to extraordinary lengths, extraordinary heights, in order to be able to achieve these. And like this one here was photographed. This is a neutrino collector um, in Japan, near Tokyo, and it's about a mile, I think, mile underground. And the way it works is like all these gold balls, um, and there's this pool. You see, there's these two guys in little tiny boats, and they're in a big giant pool. And all of this is like underground, and it's designed to pick up these subatomic particles, neutrinos, and not to pick up neutrinos coming from outer space above them, but coming from outer space from the other side of the globe. That like the neutrinos move so fast that the only ones they could possibly catch and be able to record are the ones that have gone through the center of the Earth and have been slowed down just enough that they will actually be recorded by this sensor. But anyway, I don't think Gursky was maybe that interested in all of that science. What he was interested in is just the overwhelmingness of the image. Um, but it is like the impeccability of the craft, of the care, that really sells the idea. Rebecca Warren has a much different sense of craft, and I think that that's a really good thing to remember. Is that like what is, you know, what's most important is that craft and presentation be appropriate. Rebecca Warren's work is much looser. She works in ceramics and unfired ceramics, so they are automatically impermanent materials. They have a difficulty lasting very long, and very informal sort of materials. And but then the way they're presented is very appropriate to her ideas and to her kind of obsessions with sexuality and just her general aesthetic idea, the kind of the her embrace of the slightly humorous, slightly goofy communicates with the kind of the looseness with which she works. Thomas Apps is a British painter. A number of these have actually been British artists, not Gursky. Um, Thomas Apps is a British painter. She used to be one of the young British artists, but now all the young British artists are, um, well, they're older than me, almost all of them, and that's getting pretty old. I love Thomas App's work. I think it's just phenomenal, and she just has an amazing sense of palette, of style, and this very, very clever, very subtle work. Okay, we don't just have a few seconds left, so I'll just hint at something that is really amazing about Thomas Demand. Thomas Demand is an American photographer, and I want you to look at his work carefully. And we're going to talk a little bit about the product of the work, um, his insistence on what he's aiming for in his work and how he gets it, but I'm not going to tell you as to what it is, the thing that you're seeing, because there's something that's going on in these photographs that you may not be noticing. All right, I'll get back to you in part 2.